Both the Browns and the Raiders are looking for a redemption game as they're both coming off pretty bad home losses against what I think people will consider probably a couple of the worst teams in the league. But hey, it's still the NFL. Anything can happen. Teams are allowed to have bad weeks. So we're going to break down this Week 4 matchup between the Cleveland Browns and the Las Vegas Raiders. We're going to talk about the matchups within the game that you need to look out for, and then also at the very end of the video, provide our predictions for the game. But before we get into that, Brian and I were trying to get to 100 new subscribers for our Week 4 prediction video series. And so any help is greatly appreciated. So with that being said, if you have not already, go ahead and subscribe to the Tracy Take. Leave a like and a comment. Let us know who you think is going to win this game and why. And so, Brian, yeah, both these Browns and the Raiders team, Browns lost to the Giants in pretty convincing fashion. And then the Raiders lost to the Panthers, of all teams, with Andy Dalton as their quarterback in extremely convincing fashion. And so both of them are – there's definitely going to be a try and get right game for both these teams here. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head as we were talking off air about this. But Deshaun Watson gets sacked 8 times by Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, and the New York Giants defense. I can only imagine what Max Crosby could do against this Browns offensive line, which definitely seems to be struggling. And so what do you think of kind of both of these teams so far going into this Week 4 matchup?
Yeah, I mean, the Cleveland Browns showed some life on offense last week against the Jaguars in the first half, but even then, like, still struggled after that. And then, other than that first half against the Jags, they really have not had a good offensive showing. And it was all 4 quarters against the Cowboys. They got behind. That pass rush got to pin their ears back. Deshaun Watson was just getting absolutely demolished play after play. And that is kind of, to me, what this felt like here. This wasn't quite the blowout that the Cowboys game was. But with that being said, the Giants just absolutely whipped up on this Browns subpar offensive line right now. And there are some injuries there. So it is somewhat explainable. But even then, I feel like that they would hopefully try to coach around it a little bit more or prevent some of the total misses that they've had. So, this Browns offense is in a dark place. We'll have to see what's going on the defensive side with Myles Garrett, because that is another interesting thing. I think he has a foot injury and is getting an MRI at some point this week, so his status is questionable.
I actually think I read kind of going into the game that both his feet are hurting him right now. So I think and see if one's more severe than the other. So
yeah,
but, it's a good point though. There's definitely some injuries on the Browns team to make note of. But that being said, though, I still would expect they had a lot of injuries last year, and it wasn't this way. It still wasn't this way.
Yeah, and then on the flip side, I think Las Vegas could be a potential classic trap game scenario. Carolina's supposed to be one of the worst teams in the league. We kind of saw it with Tampa Bay this week as well with Denver. Supposed to be one of the worst teams in the league. You're supposed to go in there and just kind of wreck them and manhandle them. And you don't prepare maybe the right way. You have an off week. Maybe Andy Dalton made that much of a difference for the Carolina Panthers also. But all in all, just a bad performance. This is still a really talented team. And I think going forward, I think they'll be a little bit more humble going into each week, doing a little bit more due diligence for each team. Antonio Pierce kind of called everybody out in a press conference after the game, saying people were making business decisions, and you got to play 60 minutes of football. And so I think they're going to come out with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, maybe a fire lit under them a little bit more in this week. Just, again, a more a talented defense that underperformed again. So,
yeah. And with the Raiders, it definitely is still early on in the season. We saw what the offense can become in the second half of their Week 2 game, but maybe Gardner Minshew and the receiving crew still trying to get the communication and trying to get in sync kind of during this part of the season. So it all goes both ways, to be completely fair. But one thing's for certain, both teams are not wanting the Week 3 performance to happen ever again. And so let's kind of translate now or move over to this week 4 matchup between the Browns and Raiders. But before we get into that, if you do want to put a couple of bucks down on this game or any of the other week 4 games, check out the link below in the description box. BetUS has a bunch of great promotions going on right now for first-time players. Interesting, I think, kind of going into this matchup here. Both teams are 1-2, both coming off pretty poor matchups here. I think maybe the Raiders would be the slight favorite, just kind of with the home field advantage. But this is going to be an absolute pick'em game. I can see either team pulling this one out. The Raiders, I think we all know the Raiders' explosive capabilities, as we have seen that with Gardner Minshew in the second half of their Week 2 win against Baltimore. With the Browns, though, just looking at them as of right now, and it's not really too like – played a Dallas team in Week 1, which kind of looking at it now, though, the defense doesn't seem to be nearly as top-notch as people think. Jacksonville pulled out a win, but really it's kind of a tough game for them offensively, especially into the secondary for Jacksonville was down a little bit. Now, this Giants defense, I will say, is a good defense. I would say now after a couple of weeks, especially with the Brian Burns addition.
Looking at it now in the game for the Browns, they lost 3 offensive linemen of Wyatt Teller, James Hudson, and Jedrick Wills to injuries, forced them to kind of move a bunch of pieces around, and that happened during the game. So,
yeah. I still though I look at this where their offensive rankings are at statistically right now. 31st overall in total yards, 30th in passing yards, 24th in rushing yards in the game. And I think that's going to be a big thing for this team moving forward, especially then to kind of just questions around Deshaun Watson. Like, he's supposed to be the guy. You're paying him a bunch of money. Everybody knows about the acquisition, and yet like you're still bottom of the barrel when it comes to offensive statistics. On the flip side, though, the Raiders, Gardner Minshew's obviously not the best quarterback in the league. Probably actually well below average, I think, when it comes to his overall performance. That being said, though, they're still 4th overall in total passing yards per game. Now, here's going to be the big factor, though, is they are very one-dimensional. They're 32nd overall when it comes to rushing yards that they collect per game. Oh, shoot, let me put this up. So the 32nd right now, and not really even close. So they're averaging 51 rushing yards per game. They have Zamir White, Alexander Madison in the backfield. They just don't really have a rushing game at all. And so they're very one-dimensional, and I think that makes it easy for them to kind of play against because they have Brock Bowers, Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, even to who was the guy today, Trey Tucker. Had a great game today, 7 catches, 96 yards, 1 touchdown. Very easy to play against all that, though, if you just really need to just have 3 down linemen, 4 down linemen, and have everybody else go out in coverage. It makes it very hard to pick apart. And so that, I think, is going to be the matchup. It is just, can this Browns defense be the Browns defense of old, like how we know, and really make it difficult for the Raiders to push the ball downfield through the air, because they haven't really shown at all against anybody that they're going to be able to run the ball.
Yeah, and that's me. I think that is what the Raiders want to do. That's how they built this offense. They built it for pass protection and pushing the ball down the field. Obviously, Gardner Minshew isn't necessarily the quarterback you want for that, but he is an experienced veteran who's going to make good decisions for the most part. So, outside of that, looking at this Raiders defense, Max Crosby is a really good player. They signed Christian Wilkins this offseason. I'm very curious to see if Myles Garrett is going to play in this one, because if he doesn't, I think that is a huge blow to Cleveland's chances in this matchup. And just kind of going into predictions here, I'll kick this one off. I'm going to go with Las Vegas. I think they're going to be the healthier team as a whole, just offensively and defensively. I think this offensive line is going to be in better shape. Defensively, I think they're going to be in better shape. They should be able to win that defensive line versus the Browns' offensive line matchup very consistently throughout this matchup. And I struggle to see. I mean, Cleveland has not run the ball well with Jerome Ford. I really struggle to see kind of what Cleveland is going to do offensively to counteract some of what the Raiders can do. Whereas I could see the Raiders winning with Brock Bowers over the middle, maybe winning in chunk plays and playing field position. I struggle to see Cleveland doing that. And this is going to be a critique on Kevin Stefanski. I don't know if he has that in his tool set of being able to win a 60-minute chess match against another coach. So I'm going with the Raiders here.
So I'm also going to go with the Raiders as well. And I think that's a big point too when it comes down to the coaching is it just Kevin Stefanski has been handed a lot to him, and it just honestly outside of Joe Flacco coming in that kind of saved the season last year, he hasn't really been able to do much with it. And I think that's a fair point when it comes down to the coaching as well. I think the Raiders are. We've seen this a lot. New QB comes in, new offensive system, and it just takes some time to get everybody used to it. I'm used to just kind of the lingo, knowing what to do when. For example, today, Gardner Minshew's pick was just a miscommunication between him and Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams was going to be a 10-yard. He thought it was going to be a 10-yard out route, and Minshew thought it was going to be a 10-yard pick route. So it just went right to the Panthers' corner right there. Yeah. Adams was open either way. It was just a miscommunication. And I think as the season goes on, I think those are going to be the things that they will get worked out. And in the long run, too, as well when it comes to this game, if the Browns' offensive line continues to be banged up, I have a tough time seeing them move the ball down the field. I feel like Deshaun Watson, as much fun as it is to make fun of him, as everybody who's still maybe viewing this episode probably agrees. To be completely fair to him, though, if you got a backup offensive line going up against, say, Brian Burns and a good defensive front or Max Crosby and a good defensive front, I think it's going to be a long day for any quarterback, to be completely fair. So I'm also going to go with Las Vegas. But this is going to be – I really think it's going to be a coin flip. Come to the betting odds, I think it's going to be maybe 1-point favorite to the Raiders just because they're home.
Yeah. I would usually get 3 points for being at home, so I would lean towards that. But I think this is just going to be a heavy defensive game, and I think the Raiders are going to win probably 17-10 in that fashion. So let's go ahead. We're both taking the Raiders in this matchup. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Go ahead and leave a comment down below on who you think is going to come out ahead in this matchup. Will it be the Cleveland Browns? Will it be the Las Vegas Raiders? And on that, we'll see you guys next time.